If you wanted to come down the front, there are still lots of seats down the front for those sitting at the back. First of all, I would like to say welcome to this World Summit on AI. And I'd like to clarify our topic, which is actually about finance, the future of finance, a deep dive into generative AI. If you think you're here to get money to build or make AI, that's not the right session. You should go find another session. If you're here to talk about finance and AI and how they interact, then you're definitely in the right session. For those at the back, if you want to come up the front, there are still lots of seats. So we have an incredible panel with us today, and I'd like to warmly welcome Yusra, who works with BNY, has an incredible set of credentials, and due to the shortness of our presentation, I will not read those out. They're available online. But I would like to say that Yusra has a fascination for healthcare, AI in healthcare. Ante works at Rabobank, also is in AI, and was very excited to share that his initials of his name actually spell AI, which, as I said, is very lucky because this industry could have been called something else, and I'm not sure what you would have used then. Christian is a little bit different in terms of his background. He works in finance for Heinz, so not necessarily with a financial institution, but still working on the finance side, as well as studying at my highly esteemed university in Australia. Obviously, this is an important fact to know. Christian is also a marathon runner and has run a marathon in Melbourne, but many others as well, I understand. So I'd like to warmly welcome each of the panellists and say thank you for coming today to share your insights. I should probably also say that I'm a reformed lawyer, a reformed academic, and a reformed banker. So I have some insights into some of these topics, and I'm really looking forward to breaking them down with you. I would also like to say that this panel is a slightly unusual format. Although it's early in the morning and you're not yet sleepy, I find that with a lot of these panels, people have a lot of questions. So at any point when you want to jump in, I don't want to leave questions to the end. There'll be someone roaming with a microphone. I think they're up the back at the moment. Please jump in and ask questions as you think of them and as we go along. I really want you to leave this session feeling like you've got at least some of the answers, not all of the answers, because none of us have all of the answers in this field at the moment. And if anyone tells you they do, they're making it up. So, the framing for this conversation came out of a conversation that I had with someone fairly recently. And I think it's a really good framing in that spirit of everyone doesn't have all the information. More seats down the front for the people up the back as you're coming in, lots of seats. And that is that I'm going to say that ChatGPT, for those of us particularly who've been working in this area for quite a while, is a little bit like talking about teenage sex. Everybody's talking about it, everyone thinks they're doing it, but it's not really happening as much as we think it is. And if it is happening, it's not being done as well as we're thinking it is. You see where I'm going with this, right? So the framing for this conversation, I really want to be within the limits of not being able to talk about commercially sensitive information. What is really going on in financial institutions? What is really going on in businesses that we can talk about? I'm going to throw to you, Yusra, because you're right next to me.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I would say artificial intelligence is not something from yesterday, and it's something that I've been using for years now, right? And if you guys know what is finance, finance is not just banks. Finance, it's hedge fund. Finance is insurance. Finance in more than just thinking about banks. And the more deeper you go, the more you say, okay, actually artificial intelligence and finance, they've always been together, but now they think that is really new is generative AI, right? So the transformers, the thing that changed everything in 2017. And now the question is to say, how they are used? Are they applied internally? Do we know something about it? Because actually, so far, just Bloomberg, they published and launched their product, that's all. And then also JP Morgan, they said, oh, actually, we're gonna launch index GPT. It's not a transformer, it's just an index.
Sorry, for those who don't know, does everyone know what a transformer is? There are a lot of words that get used in these industries. So it might be worth, do you mind just breaking down what
Yeah, absolutely. So a transformer is artificial intelligence model, which consists in, I would say it's not the traditional way, is a big model where instead of having the data sending them labeled data, sending them to, I would say, artificial intelligence models such as machine learning, such as neural network or whatever, and then getting information. Transformers is not this way. Like, I have a transformers, and then the transformers, you give it the information, and then it's just going to generate a lot of new things. So the transformers, you have two things, the input and the output. It's over than it's more information on sales, but yeah, it's a large language models.
Yep.
Yep.
Which have been around for a while. So there is a differentiator in the speed and the scale.
Exactly.
But again, large language models have been around in some form. No,
Twins, yeah.
you look like you wanted to say something, Ante.
I always want to say something.
Excellent.
No, I can. Oh, there's a little bit of a. Okay. I can confirm what you said. So yeah, maybe. I'm not sure if it's. Can everyone hear me correctly? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's a feedback. There's a bit of feedback. Maybe that's the AI in your name
thing,
that's triggering it. Yeah.
I suppose. No, okay. Now it seems to be okay. Yeah. No. Yeah. Transformers. It's a type of a neural network architecture, right? And what is interesting with those things is that they've been now fairly recently, scaled to an unprecedented level, right? So these transformers have been around for quite some years now, 2017, right? But recently, someone decided to bankroll one particular startup, if you will, to exponentiate the capability to an unprecedented degree.
We're getting a sign to speak up at the back, but they can't hear you. Oh.
So it's not working?
Wait.
Shall I speak louder? Or is
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah? Okay. Perfect. Or I can also use the handheld microphone. Yeah, thank you so much.
Love technology.
Yeah,
how
loving it.
improves
Okay,
our lives.
is it better? It should be. Oh, this is a profound change. Just like large language models, I suppose. Well, I'm not a large language model. Sometimes I do spit words at random. But yeah, no, I think that recently we witnessed this extreme exponentiation of that capability, right? And to your point, it's slightly different from, let's say, what classical machine learning is doing, which is commonly, let's say, associated with what we refer to as supervised learning, where we have an input and the corresponding output, and we're trying to find a mapping between the two. Whereas this thing goes into self-supervised learning. So essentially taking an enormous corpus of data and in a certain way compressing the data. Strict rules and guidelines that we each have to adhere to 100%, right? So by definition, it's not just pertaining to AI, but also many other things. But especially now when we have these extremely capable models, and perhaps good to mention, I think that, okay, it's working again. Good to mention, not internally developed, but actually available through a third party.
I want to get to that, yeah.
Exactly. So then we have a host of potential caveats here pertaining to data privacy, pertaining to further utilization of the data provided to these models, and so on and so forth. So there's a plethora of different potential challenges that we have to go through before actually putting something like that in practice, let alone create applications that will be client-facing. Where Rabobank, at least, it's not there. And it's not going to be there anytime soon, I would say, because it's a very, very thin ice.
Heinz, what's happening in your world?
Yeah, so I guess like in a different note, I do think like finance and AI, or like finance and tech, they go very well together because of finance professionals. So like a lot of like finance professionals, they are trained to deal with numbers, to deal with data, to deal with like stats, like to statistics. So that's why I have seen, not just in my company, but like in the industry of finance as a whole, that a lot of finance professionals are really trying to learn everything about AI, about machine learning, not just like the technical part of it, but also like the implementation of it, like how to use, let's say, like ChatGPT to do something, or how to use like a machine learning model to improve your forecast, something like that. And I have seen it like for a few years now already, but obviously like from the beginning of this year, then with ChatGPT coming, then everyone is way more interested on these topics.
Well, they're new and exciting, right? There's this opportunity to perhaps reduce staff, may I say out loud, to improve efficiencies, to improve returns, and there are questions around how that should be done, what obligations institutions have, but that's a broader question, I think, than just the financial institutions. You mentioned third parties, Ante, and I just want to dig down into that. I think a lot of people think about when businesses are using this tech, they say, well, we're not really using it, we're not building it, we don't have it internally. And then as soon as you ask about procurement, for the more established, advanced institutions, they'll have some kind of repository of that. How do you see procurement processes changing potentially? And I realise this is something that is a difficult question to answer. What do you see happening in your businesses, or what do you think needs to change in terms of procurement and reviewing systems and thinking about third-party risks, just that you've raised it, so now I have to pursue that line of questioning.
So actually, what I would say, it's working. So what I would say, it is regulated. Finance is regulation. Finance is economy. Finance is money. So there's money of clients. Money, not only clients, can be institutional, can be industry, can be people like you and me, right? And what happened is, yes, so somehow with generative AI and artificial intelligence, it's not only now for tech people, not only now for the IT people, not only now for quantitative people who have the knowledge of data, because data have been here for years and years. We have always everything. Our decision is based on data, actually. But the thing is, like, what is happening, it's okay. Oh, it's not working well. Okay. So what is happening is like to say, are we at this stage already, our team, let's say quantitative team, the people who are using that on a daily basis, do they have the skills for that, for artificial intelligence? Do we need, actually, no, they're not right yet, and we need them to do their job. And the thing is, like, now we will need to have people who do have artificial intelligence actually skills. So if you do need these people, what is going to happen for other people's? Because like in institution, in banks and whatever, not only banks, right? It can be whatever the company or industry you are in, there's different businesses. And now generative AI is for everyone, for each business. For sure, it's like there's a quite, a wake-up call for everyone to say, okay, first of all, as we said, regulation and also data privacy. Because using artificial intelligence or using foundational model, so it's going to be actually foundational model, open source one, closed one, licensed one, we are giving our data. But okay, there is this question now, who gonna handle it inside, right? Which business who gonna say, oh, actually use this business, you're gonna do all that, but you don't have the skills for this. So yes, there's a lot of question to say, we need to upskill our teams, not only the one who are using data, but all the teams. Otherwise, actually, as JP Morgan they said, it was Jamie Dimon said lately that with generative AI, what's going to happen is like, it's going to not be 5 days work week. We are going to 3.5 days. Okay, so meaning is like everyone will be upskills, everyone gonna use generative AI. So meaning is like you don't need to have the skills of generative AI. You don't need to know the how to use a transformer. You don't need to know the the technical. We are not creating something. It's to help you to be more productive, and it's gonna be, I would say, over time. It's gonna take time because banks all industry, they are huge companies. Huge companies, they need time to actually get with this new idea. Because now, I'm pretty sure if you ask someone, what is generative AI for you? If you go to a few countries, what is generative AI? It's like, what are you talking about? What is ChatGPT? They don't know about that, right? If you ask, like, if I ask my Mom, do you know what is ChatGPT? I'm pretty sure it's like, what are you talking about? It is something new that you know that I don't know, right?
I was recently I changed jobs, and I was talking to a recruiter, and they said, what do you tell people when you say you're looking for work on this line? And they said, if you've got a glass of wine in your hand and you're at a barbecue, because I'm in Australia. And I said, well, the first thing I say is I work in AI, and then I stop talking because they inevitably tell me I looked something up on ChatGPT and everybody's now an expert in AI, but also nobody's an expert in AI. And so it's very, very hard to have meaningful conversations about what ChatGPT can and can't do, which on that note, Gary Marcus gave a commentary. He's a prominent data scientist who's been in this field for a very long time, talking about Geoffrey Hinton's interview just a couple of days ago. And he was saying that, we have this ability to sort of present these things as magical, but we don't actually question them. The causative effect in these systems, when you say, I'm your sister, and then it says, are you my sister? The system still can't figure out those sort of derivative, basic, toddler-type questions. And I think there is a lot of, to your point, there needs to be an educational piece. Are we locked in? There needs to be an educational piece where we can actually have a staff workforce that can ask those kinds of questions. So how do you go about that? Does anyone have any ideas from the companies that they're sitting in? Christian, you look like you're nodding enthusiastically, so I'm going to ask you. And also, if anyone's got any questions, please feel free. There's a question down the front here, if we could have a mic. Thank you.
Yeah, so I fully agree on the upskilling part. I do think everyone in our companies, they need these type of skills. And as previously mentioned, is not all the technical part, but basically how to use these tools. At Heinz, for example, we have been working for, I think, 5 years now on the whole data literacy in the whole company. So we do it in tier levels on bronze, silver, and gold. So we're trying to give everyone that access to learning, basically just from data literacy, what is data, basic statistics, so on. And then the next few levels is how to use business intelligence tools like Power BI or Tableau. Afterwards, how to start using Python, R, SQL. Then afterwards, how to use Microsoft Azure, machine learning, and so on. And
I can see some eyes glazing over as you're mentioning some of those programs, because not everyone's got the same skill set, right? So you're going to need to have different trainings for different types of your workforce.
Yeah, definitely. So the whole idea is that, let's say, give access to these trainings to everyone. But as you mentioned, there are a lot of different trainings just for AI, more advanced for some people, let's say in finance or data scientists, and then some people more high level, just about what's possible with these technologies.
Yeah, amazing. We had a question down the front.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Can everyone hear down the back?
My name is Puya. Okay, my name is Puya from xm.com. So financial industries for many years, they have structured data due to regulations, compliance, and so on, right? And this data is very restricted, stored by us, not exposed only to regulators and so on. Now, how we can validate in order to expose this data to the third parties? Because to whomever I'm asking, even to the third parties themselves, they are not sure about it. Shall we wait? A regulation is going to come on top and then we can trust it and then we catch the wave? Or we're going to miss this wave and we need to wait for the next one?
Ante, you look like you want to jump in. I'm just going to say, for those who don't know, structured and unstructured data, again, because we have a very diverse audience, Structured data is your sort of your building blocks you might have in a box to play with, and your unstructured data is the stuff in your third drawer down that you never saw when you move. And you've got to figure out how to categorize it. So it's really interesting in terms of unstructured data because how you frame it and what you label it will actually have an impact on your business, and it gets very messy very quickly. So just to clarify the terminology, Ante, you look like you want to jump in.
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question indeed. But then again, you have to also understand that there's different types of data as well, right? And different types of regulation pertaining to that particular type of data, right? Myself, I'm coming from the innovation side right now, and most of the data that we use here is essentially within the public domain. So I think it's safe to say that it's not something you have to submit to the regulator and or just, let's say, explore the CLR landscape before actually leveraging a third-party solution, right? On the other hand, my experience is also coming from financial markets, so trading of different and sales of different asset classes or instruments. And over there, it's more tightly regulated, obviously. So you're not going to submit your trade confirmations or your request for quotes to a third party for the purpose of training. And it's not even, I think, sensible at this point, right? Because it's more for the unstructured data, right? But maybe to also answer your previous question about the procurement, because I think it's related to this. I think we have to take one step back and first consider, I think, at least two options that we as a financial institution have when it comes to foundational models. The first option is to essentially incinerate capital to overbuild in-house certain things, and so that later on we can develop products and services at pretty much zero marginal cost, or simply agree that we're going to take some risks and we're going to leverage a third-party solution. And these two pathways are very much different. And it's also related to your question, whether if we take on the first pathway, then obviously, well, the considerations are substantially, let's say, smaller than in the case of leveraging a third-party solution, right? So I don't know if that answers your question.
I think there's a
flip
side to that, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, that there's also a question of how you engage with third parties and what you share with the third parties. So at least in Australia just recently, there's been a request for comments on the data brokerage ecosystem, because even if you don't share your customers' information, and financial institutions have such a rich trove of data, there are often other parties that are circling around, and sometimes they're the third parties you're actually contracting with that will share that data on, and that can actually be anti-competitive. And I think the regulators are just starting to get their heads around what that means if you share that kind of data. Have you got any thoughts, or maybe Christian or Yusra?
So I would say there is something with the privacy and the data, because even when you create a model or create graphs or you explore what is happening in the market and you share this with your clients, with different regulation, it depends on what you're going to share. Let's say, for example, MiFID. With MiFID,
what's MiFID for those?
So MiFID actually is a regulation where it's about research, right? So meaning it's like if you would like advising, giving information, provide research about a stock, let's say Apple. So with MiFID, actually, you cannot provide this information, this advice to clients. So
It's just stopped. We've just lost the sound.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Does anyone have a question in the meantime?
Yes, I have a question.
Yep.
So, hello everyone. My name is Maj Jamal.
Just across the board.
Yeah, my name is Maj Jamal. I'm a data scientist at Swedish NAO. I just to understand you, just to know that I understand you correctly, the finance sector is highly regulated, and there are now complex models, but there is lack of knowledge and uncertainty on how to use these generative models. Is that a correct understanding of it?
It's working. Actually, no, I wouldn't say there is. There is regulation, of course, right? There is data privacy, of course. Now, we cannot say that there is no teams who do know how to use artificial intelligence, who do actually have the skill for that. It's not information that we don't say, right? Because I'm pretty sure all institutions They do have that. However, what we are saying is like, what is happening inside? Do all these banks are building their actually large language models? Are they there? Or actually, no, they will be thinking about to say, no, we are not building our large language models, but instead we're going to use OpenAI, for example, large language models via the license, or maybe an open source something, right? However, now the struggle is more about data privacy. It's not about to say we don't have the team or we don't have the people who don't have the artificial intelligence. They do. But the question is, are they building something inside? We don't know that, right? We don't have this information at the moment. The only information that we get about transformers and large language model, it was that Bloomberg, they built their own, Bloomberg GPT, but it was trained at 85%, so not fully trained, and it was based on their data. Meaning is like, it's too expertise in what they're doing, not everything, right? Based on their articles, based on other things. But when it comes to investment, when it comes to other business, what is it? So this is the big question. And this is where actually OpenAI, when they opened, when it was at first ChatGPT and then GPT-4, when they said, it was like, oh, actually, we are working on a license. So they were saying we are looking on the enterprise license. And it was where actually Citadel and hedge fund to say, actually, we're going to have this license. We are building something, we're going to have the license from OpenAI. So meaning that we are not building it. Also, hedge fund, Citadel, they do have the resources for that. They do have the smartest people for that, but they preferred to use OpenAI license to have their thing. So the question is to say today what banks are doing, because no one is saying nothing. So this is the question actually.
I think some of them are saying that they're leading. There's a lot of like, we're leading in this space. But as soon as you ask what they're doing, you don't really...
No.
Then the answers are not as forthcoming. If anyone... Oh, there's another question over here. Yes.
Yeah, so all of your organizations have been, and I'd include you, Dr. Lins, all of your organizations have been using neural nets for a while. But the introduction of general purpose pre-trained transformers changes a lot. These are large. As you said, you don't know what's going into them. You don't know how you're going to manage them. Specifically, what do you each think the gap between today's practice around controls and risk and the practice that you and your regulators are going to need to adopt with this new technology looks like? What has to change before you can use this stuff in anger?
So if we think about algorithmic trading, what happened? So algorithmic trading, it was for years now, right? And then high frequency, and then hedge fund using it, and then what comes is like we have the crisis. 2008 to started in 2007, the crisis. And all that actually is because of high frequency, because of algorithmic trading, because of the fact that today you have this big actually computer, this so smart algorithm that they're using, that they're able to actually get just having trades every single second, right? Making this. So the question is to say large language models are huge. They can do a lot of things. So meaning is like, if you can, let's say you're going to give them 1 million and let's try it with that. They can do whatever they want to, right? It's like, actually you can lose it all. But there is something, risk management. First of all, we don't want to lose money. First of all, we need to know what is happening, what this thing is doing. Are we ready to have the thing, to trade? Are we there? We are not there yet, right? So the thing is like, what we question is also to say, we can use generative AI to summarize articles, easy. Then in the morning, because everyone is writing articles sent to clients, we're going to use this instead, right? But for other things, it's more complicated because regulation, economy, we do have directly impact in what is happening on the market. We can, if all banks, they were using generative AI to trading, it's going to be, things will happen. So we need to be careful, we need to understand this, and it's going to take time.
You look like you. So just before you jump in, I think it's an excellent question to talk about the gaps in the regulatory space and where the missing pieces are. But it's also really important, and I like the way you framed the question, to say, what have we been doing all this time? So if you go back to the core algorithms of banks that issue mortgages or do trades, I mean, that's been algorithmically driven for decades, and there are safeguards around that. So the fundamental question I think you're asking, if I've understood correctly, is what's different with ChatGPT? Is this a brand new thing? Is it not? And I have ideas, but I'm going to hand over to Ante because I think that's what your question was. Is that right?
I think there's some specifics around certification barriers.
Yep.
Human in the loop, or as is the case, say, with like principal trading right now, having a human over the loop as opposed to in the loop. When is that not good enough? Which regulators? Is there even a regulatory consensus? You guys know all this. I would love to hear how it feels to you.
I think this is an excellent question. Indeed, I think that's a very good question with respect to whether there is a regulator or regulation for these things. I don't think there is yet, especially pertaining to generative AI. Right? When it comes to algorithmic trading, yes, we definitely have guardrails there. It's been happening for many decades now. When it comes to generative AI, it is leveraging different type of data, and with that also, let's say, a different type of regulation should be put in place, I would say. And especially when it comes to the oversight of these kinds of models, right? Of course, it will depend whether we're using it for internal purposes to increase operational efficiency, or if we're going to use it for something else. So maybe creating new products and services, or actually applications that are going to be client-facing, for instance. There's a world of difference between the two, right? When it comes to internal applications, yes, you have a lot of leeway there, and you can do quite a lot without actually reporting anything. And because it's staying within the confines of your own bank, you're not doing anything within the gray area, everything is okay, except it's a little bit more automated now, especially if you're not using a third-party solution. But once this becomes more client-facing, either directly or could indirectly have profound effects on our client base, well, then the regulation should kick in. Internally, it's kicking in, at least within Rabobank. We have very firm regulation when it comes to the usage of generative AI, which is, again, a very much an umbrella term. It can encompass many things, but let's say specifically ChatGPT and these kinds of, or any instance of a GPT. But for now, I would say that the human oversight is extremely necessary. So you cannot let it run amok. That is not going to happen anytime soon, for sure. There has to be a human in the loop. Everything has to be supervised by a human operator and the expert in that particular field. And it has to have, think of it as a digital signature before going out to either another department or let alone outside of the bank. So that it has been, let's say, proofread by a human expert.
If I can jump in to disagree on something, because we've all been very agreeable and it's much more fun when people disagree. I'm going to say there's a small caveat on the humans on the loop, and I've written a piece called 7 Myths of Humans on the Loop. I think a lot of people, it's an engineering term which really came from the idea of on a factory floor you can pull a lever and stop production. But with these systems that we're talking about, I think sometimes we say this in a way, like in The Princess Bride, the movie. I do not think that word means what you think it means when you're saying that word. So I think having humans on the loop does serve a certain purpose, but you're also talking about things at speed and scale that humans don't know how to interrogate, they don't know how to stop, they don't know how to actually, they don't even know when the impacts are happening. And to the point of regulation, I think we also need to look beyond regulation to a broader toolbox of other tools that we have, like the new standards that are coming, the new International Standards Organization, 42001, which is an AI management standard, which is situating the use of these tools in a broader corporate risk framework, which we've done before. That bit's not new. So again, I think that will cover some of it. Christian, do we have any other questions as well? But just as I'm waiting for Christian, there's one over here on the side. Thank you. Christian.
Can I take the question? Or?
Yeah, no, we'll go to you while we're sorting out the mic.
Yeah, I want to say, like, on that part of the human in the loop of, until, like, I actually do agree, like, I have
We're
been
agreeing,
training,
or you're agreeing?
I agree with him, because, like...
Oh, that's so much more fun. Excellent.
I have been training a lot of people, like, this year, like finance professionals, on basically how to use ChatGPT only for finance. And then one of the main things that I convey on that training is, like, okay, if you just use ChatGPT and then whatever it's in there, you send it to your boss, then it won't work. Then to really use, like, that particular tool, like ChatGPT, as a junior member of your team. Yes, it can do some of the things very, very fast, and it can do like 1 week of work in a couple of minutes, but then that human in the loop part, at least, it has to be supervised by someone. And then after that supervision, after that like person with finance experience, then they supervise the output, then they can use it elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm not saying humans shouldn't be on the loop. I think they should be, but I think often when we use the term, it's sort of a catch-all, fix everything in a way that isn't necessarily possible, even with ChatGPT, because we do have this magical thinking, which, you know, the first creator of the chatbot Eliza talked about. We have this sort of magical thinking of these systems, and we've seen it with the talk of sentient AI and whatnot. Sorry, yeah, you still don't have the microphone. Sorry, we're still waiting for a microphone down the side. Thanks very much.
Yeah. So my question is,
Oh my God.
question.
Is it safe? I think that's under control. Sorry about all the eventful technology events on the side over here. Sorry, sir, do you have the microphone? If you don't mind introducing yourself as well.
Yeah. So my question is, so you mentioned about Bloomberg GPT. So what is the strategy you use to train your Bloomberg GPT? Like the basic principle of training this model is using internal data, like you adapt to the financial data from your bank and also use the external data. But how, let's say you manage to train your GPT, but how can you make sure it can do multiple tasks? Are you creating multiple instances of this GPT and making them using for multiple tasks, or how are you going to use it within the bank?
So I'm not sure that anyone's able to speak specifically about how they're using it internally, but if you are.
I would say we talk only about public information, I would say, but the example of Bloomberg GPT, it was to say more Bloomberg GPT, so Bloomberg, so they do have authors data about, the article, the news and authors, and then, so for example, they can use it and create their own to have this large language model to have, like, for example, write articles based on all the things they have been always doing, right? And also, it can be used for different functions that they are provided to the clients. So depending on what they're using. So Bloomberg, for example, they use their own data, and also they use public data to make it more general somehow, but it's more expertise in finance. Now the question how it works for banks, it is the question actually. What is going to happen? So the only thing that we know at the moment is like Citadel, they're going to go for a license. And for the time being, till we have more information, we don't know.
No, like it does, but like you can use the GPT model to do multiple tasks.
So
let's say you want a summary or you want only named entity recognition. But the problem with the GPT is if you train for only one specific task, it can forget the other task. So how do you manage it? Huh? Let's say you have 3-4 use cases within the bank and you want to use the same GPT model. How are you going to use this? Or are you going to replicate or create multiple instances and making them, each GPT will take care of one task? Or are you going to make it multiple purpose? Like, okay, you feed all type of data, summary, name entity recognition, and use only one GPT. How are you going to manage this architecture?
So if you go generally, if we speak about, ChatGPT can do a lot of things, right? So the thing is, based on the business that you are working, based on the data that you have, you will not be using the same thing for fine-tuning. This is where fine-tuning comes in, right? So it depends. So all the business are different. Whatever the industry, all the business are different. All the data, they're different. So if we look at that, how we're going to use, how fine-tune ChatGPT or other models, maybe people, they don't want to use this one. Maybe they just want to use Llama and fine-tune it with their data. So it will depend on the specific task. It can be, for example, if you are a strategist, Maybe you have this company that will say, oh, I'm a strategist, I'm writing articles all day, but few times I don't need, actually, I don't need, for example, to write it, take 1 hour, 2 hours to do it if it is just a small summary on what is happening this week, right? So yes, you're gonna just fine tune it for this task. And the thing is, with large language models, they can do multiple tasks, many tasks, right?
don't need-
Compared to traditional models, it was like only for one task, either classification or something else, right? So this is different. Again, it depends on the business, it depends on the data that you have and what you're doing. And I would say the large language models at first, what is gonna happen is like it's gonna be a help in productivity, right? Things that you're doing every day, same thing, you can use this for that. Like summarizing articles.
Well, I think a really good way to think of it is also to reframing that question, to think about what's your problem statement. And this goes for all industries. So I think there's been a huge rush, and I saw this at the time when I was in my role, that there's a new tool, we have to be the first to use it, we have to be the first to use this data, when in fact the real question should be, what are the business problems in front of me that I need to have resolved? And is this the tool for that? Is this energy consuming, expensive, time consuming tool the thing that we need? Or could we do this with something far simpler, with Power BI? And so I think that maybe reframing that sort of questioning is another way of thinking about it. There's another question down the front. And I'm conscious of the time. We started late, so I think we've still got a few more minutes for a couple more questions.
Yes, thank you. My name is Burak Genç from PwC, and I was wondering whether you are preparing or seeing any change in the competitive landscape in finance. Because I can imagine, with the rise of Apple Pay and Facebook's Libra and all those kinds of developments, is that something that you're considering, that you have to also now compete with big tech companies instead of just your regular financial?
Would Rabobank would you like to talk about that, Ante?
Yeah. Interesting. Yes. Well, indeed, I think quite a lot of big tech actually has a banking license now. And obviously, it's a direct competitor suddenly, especially when it comes to, they usually tend to integrate through payments, and then through payments also embedded finance goes, these things go together, right? Whether it's a direct competitor for Rabobank, I would say not really. Rabobank is a very specific bank. I'm just obviously talking from my own perspective, in the sense that it's a market leader in the food and ag sector. So I don't think that the competitive landscape will change drastically for Rabobank. For other banks, I'm sure that there will be some changes. Yes. We're looking into that. We're also being very careful when it comes to collaborating with certain third parties, because they might in the future pose, I'm not going to say a threat, but let's say might be a competitor, direct one. So from that perspective, we're taking that into account. We're considering the fact that some of these companies tend to evolve and tend to claim other territories beyond what is within their scope right now. But I would say from Rabobank's perspective, we don't really feel it, at least yet.
So I think we're going to have to wrap up here, although I can still see there are more questions, and I feel like we could talk much, much longer about this. I'd like to thank each of you for your contributions, and thanks to everyone for the questions, despite the sound problems and the small environmental collapse that we had during our presentation. Thanks for staying, thanks for listening, and I hope you got something out of this session. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks a lot.